Have you ever wondered how a few days at a retreat could possibly create real and lasting change? Have you ever felt drawn to coaching, mindfulness, breathwork, or even yoga as a form of healing and recovery, but also wondered at the same time, does it really work? Is there really evidence? What if what medicine taught us to dismiss as woo is actually simply something that is unfamiliar? What if the deepest, most transformative work doesn't have to look hard? What if comfort, beauty, rest, and spaciousness are not distractions from transformation, but part of what makes transformation possible?
Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co-host is Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang. We are two board-certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice.
Welcome to today's episode. What if it's not woo at all? The methods behind real transformation. So I hear questions all the time about this idea of woo and what is woo and what is real and what is rigorous. And I wanted to talk about it. So sometimes friends come with friends who have worked with me who know about this work, and the friends are skeptical. They're coming with their friend because they trust their friend and because they want to spend time with their friend. And they're curious, potentially. They're sure that they'll have a nice time and the food will be good and it will be beautiful and they will relax and maybe they'll learn something. Or maybe they like yoga, so they're coming for a yoga retreat. Or maybe they like to eat, so they think they're coming for that. I want to offer that when people come, they are often in their evals surprised that such significant real transformation can happen in 3 days. And I see this also in coaching. People are blown away by the transitions and transformations that shift after just a session or two. And that's not true for everybody. But for most people, things look and especially feel dramatically different. And so I just want to touch on this idea of what medicine has taught us to be skeptical about. Medicine trained us to be discerning, and it trained us to trust what is measurable, what is familiar, what is structured, and also what is hard. And hard means it's valuable and worthwhile and of value. So when something feels and looks spacious, beautiful, nourishing, relational, or even pleasurable, many physicians wonder if it counts, if anything real actually happens there, or they think they're maybe getting away with something. And yet what I would offer is that what happens doing this work in settings like that is more impactful and more transformative, not just for you, but for your patients and for all of those who work with you as well. And so I encourage you, if you're at all curious about coaching, curious about retreats, curious about mindfulness, the power of reflection, nervous system work, breath work, yoga work, and experiential learning, keep listening to this podcast because I'm going to share some pearls of wisdom there, and come and experience it for yourself. My intention here today is to pull back the curtain a little bit on what happens underneath the work that I offer. Because while it looks soft and lovely and amazing on the outside, which it is, the methodology is not soft. It's very strategic. It's well honed. It's grounded in research, lived experience, and then years of witnessing what actually helps physicians change. And so while the transformation looks like magic, it's not magic. It's actually a method. I like to say there's a method to the madness or the magic. So first to talk about what medicine calls woo, and that very often it's shorthand for something that feels unscientific, hard to measure, or simply outside the usual medical framework. Woo, in quotes, often means we don't understand how it works yet. We weren't trained to recognize it as credible, or it simply doesn't look like what we know. Mindfulness, coaching, reflection, breathwork, yoga, retreats, nervous system regulation, experiential learning, 100% do not look or feel like rounds, lectures in windowless conference rooms, algorithms, practice guidelines, or protocols. It does not mean that they lack rigor or impact. It does not mean that learning isn't happening. It does not mean that it's not helpful to you as a practicing physician in providing high quality, low cost care. It does not mean it doesn't impact burnout. It doesn't mean that it isn't better for patients if you experience it. It just means it's different than what people know, and certainly different than what the people who review checkboxes for CME requests know. It can, of course, be framed in words and ways that they recognize, and it offers real CME because it actually is evidence-based and does cover helpful things that do make a change in clinical practice and patient care and sustainability in medicine. So just to remind you that real learning is happening, and I think even to honor for yourself that real learning is happening, and to recognize that real learning can actually feel good. I think in medicine, we equate suffering with real learning or value. And so recognizing it, you don't have to suffer to learn, you don't have to suffer to grow, you don't have to suffer to transform. And in fact, more learning goes on when you are relaxed. Transformation science shows this, that when we're relaxed, we retain information better and we integrate it into our future behavior more efficiently and effectively. We're more receptive to change in a parasympathetic state. Nobody changes or learns or grows when they're in sympathomimetic storm or cortisol bath. That's why lunchtime conferences rarely lead to long-term change. There's also a ton of research behind it, which I'm not going to offer here, but most people know that there's mindfulness research, and in the United States, there's quite a bit. We know it helps with a lot of medical conditions. We also know it helps with burnout. There are studies being done right, left, and center in terms of presence. And in other countries, specifically in India, there's tons more actual quality research. There's tons of neuroscience research about behavior change, most of which we don't lean into in the practice of medicine. There's a lot of research around coaching, and I share a lot of this on my website, but there are randomized controlled trials to show that it makes an impact on clinicians and physicians in terms of quality of care, cost of care, retention, burnout scores, et cetera, et cetera. There is a lot of science around learning. People get PhDs in education. We know a lot about how we learn. And interestingly, in medicine, we rarely lean into learning science. We lean into hard science, we call it, or bench science, physical science. But given the amount of things that we learn and that we need to learn ongoing, leaning into learning science is a really powerful shift that we could make. And also recognizing that we do not learn when we are completely exhausted. We do not learn from a place of shame, blame, or guilt. We can force it in, white knuckle it, pass the test, but the retention and the integration is not there. There's also a lot of science around the nervous system and how it responds to trauma. And everyone in medicine has been exposed to some kind of trauma. There's a lot of new work coming out about somatics and how we can work with our bodies in that way. There's a lot of science around yoga and breathwork research related to stress management, resilience, well-being. I often share, I love this book called Good Morning, I Love You, which most of you know, and I'm often asked for like the resources. There are 14 pages of tiny print references of real studies shared by a PhD about much of this work. So that is just an example. The Yoga as Medicine book has, zillions of studies in each chapter about how it impacts different things. These are just not things we study in medicine. But there is a lot of research there. What I don't think there's so much research in, but what I see is that when you put all these tools together, their impact is even more impactful. And that is sort of the methodology that I bring that's a bit different. And that's true whether it's on Zoom or in person, although the experience is absolutely different. The methodology is real, and I like to say it's repeatable. I've been doing this for 6.5 years, and the results are similar. They, in fact, just get better and better over time as the methodology is refined and the way of weaving different modalities together synergistically has even bigger effects. So I want to pivot here for a moment to talk about something you all already know, that medicine teaches us that suffering is what we must do. It's the rigorous, it's virtuous. And I want to offer that suffering is not virtuous, it's suffering. And that we can actually learn things when we don't suffer, but that we very often bring that physician cloud to it, that we can't trust the work if it's pleasurable, and that there's pleasure and there's work. There's a right and wrong and an all or none. So, and this idea that growth and learning has to be uncomfortable to learn, to really learn what you need to learn. And that's the way that medical training works, but it doesn't have to be that way. We also are trained to expect that real CME, I'm going to put it in quotes, happens in windowless conference rooms. And maybe we are happy with ourselves if it's in a beautiful place, but we usually miss out on that beautiful place for at least half the day and feel frustrated that maybe our families who we brought with us are enjoying it because we're listening to lectures and watching PowerPoints that we may or may not be absorbing. Usually we're texting and looking at other things on our phone and trying to multitask and do multiple things at the same time. And I'm not certain that that is the best way to learn. I have learned things at conferences in that way, but if I'm thinking about the things that have changed my practice of medicine for the better, those learnings come differently. They come in discussion-based learning. They come in interactive. They come when you're engaged. They come in small groups. They come in discussions. So can you have deep and meaningful work that also feels good, 100%. And when you are nourished and when you are not tired and when your nervous system is healthy, you actually learn more. And the other thing I want to say is that when you are learning, you are very tired at the end of the day. Someone said they couldn't believe how tired they were after coaching and doing yoga and sleeping a lot. And it's because you are actually allowing your nervous system to rest, and it takes a lot of brain work to do that. And so when you couple hours of that with hours of rest and relaxation, it's actually balancing out. You're having systole and diastole at the same time, and that's where you can absorb it. Remember how you feel in a conference where you've been at lectures all day and you just can't absorb anymore. And that happens a lot sooner in suboptimal environmental conditions. So when you're interrupting old patterns, which is not what happens in a windowless conference room, but what does happen in coaching and at retreats, it actually is hard work. And being honest with yourself and relearning how to feel safe and trust yourself is actually very hard work. It is very rigorous work. And comfort is often around you what makes rigorous inner work possible. And so just recognizing that it's actually all part and parcel of a very specific design. Now, it doesn't have to be Miraval to make this happen. And in fact, you can just have that beautiful environment and not have the type of learning that you need. Not that Miraval is not wonderful, but I think you want to be clear about a very specific environment, again, a methodology to it, where you've set up an environment with a purposeful setup for purposeful kinds of learning. So onto this idea of transformation. And transformation doesn't happen from information, which is kind of what we're used to in medicine. So of course, when you are trying to transform, it isn't the slides of learning of a PowerPoint that allows you to transform. Transformation is actually about integration. not information. So we're exceptional at consuming information. We know how to read, we know how to study, we know how to master, we know how to memorize, synthesize, and apply. But as we all know, information does not create lasting change. For our patients, we can educate them till we're blue in the face, but if they don't integrate it and they're not experiencing, practicing, which is one of the reasons why I space virtual coaching out over more time, and I don't have you just meet every week, because you are integrating and practicing. What you practice grows, and what you don't practice recedes. And so just to recognize that even the idea of having these conferences, sort of binge learning at a conference, where you're gathering information, is not necessarily the most efficient process. And so that's where I really think you want to look at the methodology and look at the environment and think about how you want to learn and how you want to change. And what I'll offer is what we do speaks much more loudly than what we say to our patients and what we model. And so engaging in woo work is experiential learning, and it's allows you to come back integrating learning and shifting yourself so you can model those things for your patients, which is why it impacts patient care so heavily. Also, more mindful physicians are more present, and there's quite a lot of studies to show that present physicians not only have higher patient satisfaction scores, they have higher compliance, and they non-burnt out physicians who are more mindful and more present and who have learned many of the things that you learn using some of these woo approaches actually provide better patient care and spend less money and certainly stay longer in their practices if it's a reasonable place to practice. And so what transformation is it's insight that's integrated. It's not just understood, but you actually live it, you embody it, you practice it. It's integrated, I like to say, at the cellular level, and your nervous system understands it. So that's what experiential learning is. It engages the whole person in learning: mind, body, emotion, memory, relationships, meaning, choice. So it's really maybe like a practice lab for a new way of being, or a place where you can try on new ways of being. You can see how other people have made shifts. And that is not woo learning. It's real learning and real transformation that creates real change. It actually creates changes in your practice of medicine for the long term and in your life for the long term, so that you can practice medicine for the long term. The other thing I want to offer here is that when we engage in some of these alternative or unfamiliar modalities, real change can actually happen much faster than you think, and much faster than we are taught to expect in medicine. And in fact, big systems change very, very slowly. And our patients often change very, very slowly. And so medical training teaches us that meaningful change often takes years, and it takes suffering. Residency takes years, fellowship takes years, becoming the physician that you are experientially takes years. So this idea that something could shift in a few days at a retreat or in a coaching conversation, even in an hour, I hear that all the time, doesn't make sense. Our brains are trained to doubt that, and they're trained to think that it's shallow or that it won't last. And what I would offer is that it's actually happening in flow. It's happening without the battle and without the struggle. And that's why it can happen so fast, and why it can be integrated and actually last a long time. So when the conditions are right and the right questions are being asked in a state of pause, in an optimal environment where your nervous system feels safe, there's not this noise distracting you, and you are actually also practicing a combination of reflection and embodiment and coaching and perspective shifting, and you are doing it in community, in silence, and in nature. That's actually where, in a few days, you can change lifelong patterns. And that's not because it's magic, it's because it's very intentional. And so I, again, hear so often at the end of a retreat that I'm floored that my perspective could shift so quickly, and that I didn't believe that this was possible. But my friend told me it's possible, so here I am. And so I just want to say, like, we often say it's magic, and I actually love the idea of magic, but it's much more than magic. So the most powerful tools out there, though, are also often deceptively simple. And in medicine, we think that complex is better, but simple tools like breathing, or taking a pause, or asking one helpful question or a different question, going for a walk, putting your hand on heart, or having an intimate conversation with other people who care and get it and understand, that's where things shift. This simple question that I ask all the time, what would love do, is an absolutely life-transforming question. And so simple does not mean shallow. It doesn't mean that it's not worthy or worthwhile or legit or real. It really means like distilled, clear, efficient. You've essentially dropped the resistance and the clogs. And I'm not the only one who says this. I remember I had a retreat guest a few years ago who shared that this idea of what would love do has become for her a real clinical and life practice. It's not just for me. She, who is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, actually said that it is something she uses in crisis, in motherhood, in her marriage as a physician, when making decisions, when she's being reactive, in her clinical practice. She uses it all of those places. So to recognize that these things that can seem just deceptively simple can actually, because they're so simple, be transformative. So stepping out of that old thought pattern that harder is better and suffering is virtuous, and that, complex is more meaningful. What if it were simple? I love that question. And a lot of these practices are simple, and we discredit them because they're simple, like taking a breath, or practicing hand on heart, or asking yourself one good question every day. So as I get to the end of this somewhat amusing reflection on woo and methodology, I'm hoping it's shed some light on some of these tools. The other thing that I feel called to mention is one of my very good friends, Dr. Ann Kennard, used to always say that practices that have been helpful to humankind for hundreds of years, things like mindfulness and yoga, there's something to them, even if we haven't read the studies. And so allowing yourself to remember that a lot of these practices, forest bathing done in other countries, sound healing, chanting, there's actually a lot of science, nervous system science, somatic science around them. And to remember that things that have been done for humanity for hundreds of years, there's usually something to them that people continue to do them. So a couple reflection questions. Where are you treating unfamiliar as not credible? Where are you still equating suffering with value, with rigor, with importance, and with meaning? What kinds of learning have given you information, but not the change that you were looking for, whether in your practice or in your life? What might become possible if comfort, beauty, rest, and spaciousness became an integral part of your healing and your growth? What would shift if you trusted that real change can happen much faster than medicine has taught you to expect? So at the heart of this episode, it's simple. What transforms us rarely arrives in the packaging that we expect. It can come sometimes through silence and reflection. It can come sometimes through coaching. It can come through breathwork, through yoga, through community. It can come in a beautiful place. It can come with a healthy nervous system. It can come through one simple question. And this does not make that work less real or the results less valuable or important or impactful. And that when you put all these things together, they are synergistic. And that's really where things can happen at a pace that surprises you. And a reminder that transformation, it's not about gathering information. I have a lot of people who come to coaching consults wanting to write everything down and make sure things check a box in the way that they have been thinking about things before. And I always say at the end of retreats, if you leave here thinking the way that you came, you'll get the same results that you came with. So if you want different results, you actually have to go forward differently. You have to approach something differently. You have to approach it, as we say, with beginner's mind or hands wide open. And that true transformation goes beyond that because it's doing that in your real life as integration, integrating it into your relationships at home, with your children, with your partners, into your relationships with your patients, into your relationship with yourself. And so it's not just information, it's action. And this is actually why I offer the advanced coaching groups after retreats, because people go home and get shifted results, but then they want to continue to shift ongoing. And having these touch points and supporting yourself over time while you're integrating is super, super powerful. So just keeping in mind that there is learning that doesn't come from a PowerPoint. That's really powerful. Embodied learning, compassionate learning, spacious learning, nature learning. And there is a true methodology to it. There's research to it. And the change that you get is not only magical, it's also real, impactful, and it lasts. So I hope this has opened up some new thoughts in your mind. If anything resonates here, reach out to me. This is the time for people reaching out for one-on-one coaching over the summer. And there's space in fall retreats if you want to come experience them for yourself. I'm about to open up all of the fall coaching groups. In fact, by the time this podcast airs, they will be open. And if you've been on a retreat, I strongly encourage you to join me for advanced coaching. It's pretty cool what can happen as a next step. I will also be offering Transition Well, and I'll be offering leadership coaching, and I may offer relationship coaching. I haven't quite made a decision on that one yet. So if you're interested in that, let me know. But advanced coaching, leadership coaching, and Transition Well will be options. And I'm going to be changing up the days of the week for all of those, and also changing up the times so that some of them will be a little bit earlier for folks on the East Coast who have been wanting to join for a while but haven't been able to. Thank you all so much for listening. Have an amazing week. And if you would, please, please, please leave us a review, a written review for the podcast. It helps people find us, helps us tremendously. And I know so many of you have been listening for years and years and haven't left us a review yet. And I know it's not the easiest thing to click on there and leave one, but we would super appreciate it. And it's part of what keeps us going all the way to this episode, which is 318 over 5.5 years. So if you'd be willing to do that for us, we would be most appreciative. And we would love, love, love to meet you in person. And I didn't mention Connect in Nature, but please join us for that as well. It's the only opportunity to join both Ni Chang and I. And we don't offer it every year. So it's happening on July 30th to August 1st this year at Green Gulch Farm and Zen Center and Muir Woods and Muir Beach. And we've got a few spots left, and we would really love it if you joined us. And you can bring people who are special to you, who are not in medicine, who identify as men. This is your one and only chance to bring those people to a retreat with you and experience some of the magic of this work. And also, the Zen Center is amazing. Doing yoga in a yurt is amazing. And Muir Woods and Muir Beach are also amazing. So join us if you can make it.
Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find Ni-Cheng Liang at Awakened Breath and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence.
Welcome to today's mindful moment. A moment to be curious, thinking about jumping into something that feels new and different, suspending your skepticism, and believing in things that you haven't witnessed or experienced before. Noticing where you may be judging things as not rigorous because they aren't hard, there isn't suffering. Taking in a deep breath and just pouring that breath through your body, washing out any of that judgmental energy. And if it's safe to do so, close your eyes and bring a hand to heart. And simply asking yourself some of the reflection questions at the end of this episode. Where are you not jumping into something that could potentially help you because of skepticism? Whatever it is. Where are you equating hard with virtuous, suffering with virtuous? And where are you judging your colleagues for it? Noticing any tension in the heart space or a lump in the throat, enjoying 3 more deep breaths here. And just allowing your brain to go wherever it wants to go, noticing the hand on hand, hand on heart, melting the cortisol, and inviting a beginner's mind, inviting that curiosity. What if all things were possible? What if you believed that the things that you most wanted were possible? How would you get there? What might help you? Where are you getting in your own way? How might you get out of it? Is there something out there that you've really been wanting to do, you think might be able to help you, but you're not sure? You're worried about making a mistake, so you avoid it. Or are you skeptical of practices that might seem woo, whatever that means to you? Some people know exactly what that means, and other people wonder. I have no idea what I'm talking about, and that's okay too. Enjoying 3 more breaths together, letting whatever surfaces surface. Bringing your hands down by your sides, palms up into that beginner's mind, open, receptive position. Noticing how that feels in your body at the cellular level. And opening your eyes here with your hands wide open. Looking at the possibility of the world out there and the things out there. What might your next steps be? Thank you all so much for practicing with me today. I hope to practice with you again soon. We'll see you next week.